Hello, my name is Sebastian, and I'm going to make a walkthrough on Visual Studio Code for my project. So VS Code is an extremely popular programming IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment, created by Microsoft that can run many different programming languages and supports lots of frameworks and libraries. It's a great tool for any programmer if utilized properly, and it contains a built-in terminal so you can run a command line inside of the code editor, which is right here. It also contains syntax highlighting, code snippets, and keyboard shortcuts to make a wonderful developer experience. So to start out, I want to go over the organization of VS Code. So this is the layout. You have the sidebar over here on the left. Then you have an activity bar, a toolbar, tabs, the split editor button that we'll talk about later, an editor, and a panel, which is how you interact with the terminal at the bottom. So to start out, we're going to go over the basic features of VS Code. So the basic features are, the big features are file, edit, selection view, go, run, terminal, and help up here in the toolbar. So the first one we're going to go over is the run command. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open another folder, which we'll go over later how to do. And in order to see the run command for this specific file, I'm going to add a breakpoint here. I'll go over what a breakpoint is later in debugging. But here we'll go with run and start debugging. And this is a Python file. So you can see that there's a command down here in the command line, which is basically what runs the file. It's running it using Python and a Python executable. So it's running the Python file, and up here we have a whole bunch of different options. If you use the debugging mode, you'll see all these different options, these skips, these step into, step out of, restart. But if you run without debugging and something crashes, most likely you'll only see the stop, the start, or the stop and the restart. We'll go over debugging later, but this is basically how you run a file in VS Code. And this is much nicer because you don't have to take the time to start up the terminal and type in the file name and then hit enter. And you have a debugger right within the editor. And I'm going to leave this down here so that you have a reference to what each of these features are as I go through the presentation. So for the run command, all we did was go into the file, no, to the run, and then we clicked start debugging. So the next thing I'm going to do is go over making folders and opening files. So first, to make a folder, if I were to make a folder within this, I would click the stop run button, click this Explorer button, and that'll bring me back to this file on the sidebar. I'll have this sort of file directory. I right click, click new folder, and now I can just type in the name of whatever folder I want to make. And this will be reflected in my file directory when I open up my File Explorer. So if I go into my File Explorer and I go into where this is, I'll see this test folder that I just made. So I could just make it in the File Explorer, but it is a lot easier here. And then for a new file, I can go either here or to another way to do this is to go into the toolbar right here and go into new file or new file. I can make a Python file and then I can type whatever I want here. The problem with this is that when you go to save it, it's going to bring up the File Explorer. So a way that you can do this without bringing that up is to just right-click a folder or right-click inside of the sidebar if you want it in the if you want it in the folder that you have opened in VS Code. Click New File, and then the name of the file name, and then you have to add an extension. So if you know what you want to make, you can put .py or .text or .java, and it'll make it for you. As long as it can detect if you have all the extensions for that programming language installed. So here I'm just going to make another text file in here, and then and you can see that reflected in the File Explorer also. So the next thing that we're going to cover is creating and moving files and folders. So really the simplest way to move these is to just drag it and then move down here. It'll ask you if you want to move whatever file you're trying to move into this other folder, and you can just hit move, and just like that you can move it. And this is how you would delete a file. Break it, hit delete, and then move to recycle bin, and that's all there is to it. You can also do the same with folders if you have multiple directories nested in between each other. You can move folders around by just clicking and dragging them. Since we only have one folder open and one folder inside of that folder, we can't really move this folder anywhere. The next thing I want to talk about is creating multiple terminals. So this is the way to create them so that we can run one thing here and then have another process running at the same time right here. And this is the split terminal button. So this will give us two different terminals that also lets us run one thing at the same time. And you can see that these two are part of the split. Or we can either move between these two or this one. These are all separate terminals. And so I just started a command line, and then now these are both PowerShell terminals. And we can run command line operations on both of them. So the next thing I want to talk about is now we're going into the advanced user section. So we've learned how to move folders, create folders, we've learned the layout of VS Code. Actually, there's one more thing I'd like to talk about, which is opening editors and closing them. So opening editors, the easiest thing to do is to just drag these files, or clicking on them will also open them. You can drag these files into the tabs. These are your tabs. And to close them, here you can hit this X in the corner on each tab. This X right here in this open editors window, or this one to close all tabs at once. And here we have our VS Code window back to its normal state. Now, we've pretty much covered everything that a basic user would need to know. Next, we have the advanced users section. So to start this off, Prettier is a code formatter for JavaScript, TypeScript, HTML, and CSS. This is our first extension that we're going to talk about. So an extension is something that you need that goes inside Visual Studio Code and it gives it additional functionality. These are your lists of extensions here. So to add it, we're going to look up Prettier. Here, I already have it installed, but what you have to click is the install button. Click that, it'll install, and then we can go back to our directories. So Prettier is mainly a tool that can be used for JavaScript, HTML, CSS, PHP, mainly for web development technologies. These are all the code, the languages that it supports. So if we go back, and I am now going to show you using how we open, so this is how we can switch our folder directories. I'm going to show you what Prettier looks like. So I'm going back into this images folder, and this is what a sample of code would look like before using Prettier. As you can see, all of this is pretty messed up. You can't really read it very well compared to this picture, which is after Prettier. Give me 1 second while it loads. Okay, I'm back. So this is what it looks like before Prettier, and this is the same code after Prettier. So you can clearly see what's going on here. It's very indented. Each of these special tags are on the same line with each other, and every unique tag has a indentation from another unique tag, which is how you would like a website program code to look. So this is a very helpful tool so that you don't have to type enter and tab hundreds of times in order to make this same display. You can just install this extension and it'll make it for you. And the next extension I want to talk about is Vim. So Vim is a very advanced tool, which is why I'm not going to be going through it in my tutorial today. But this is how you would install it. Click install, and then there is some additional configuration in order to enable it. But once you have it enabled, all you have to do is click the I button for insert, and it'll change your cursor from a text editing cursor to an insert cursor to a different type of cursor. And then you can move around the page with your keyboard instead of typing. Sorry, you go from, you click the escape to get out of your text editor, and then the insert character will get you back in it. So if you click the escape button, all of your keys will be a different movement on the keyboard, or on the text editor. Instead of typing, you will be moving around. Is the basic idea of Vim. So you don't really need a mouse to type code or to navigate through code. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is the debugging tool. So we're going to go back to my other file. And then we're going to talk about this breakpoint. So a breakpoint is when I start debugging this Python file, it'll stop there, And I'm going to get a whole bunch of variables here. So the idea of debugging and breakpoints is I'll put a breakpoint somewhere, I'll look at the variables that are being passed there, and the whole idea of debugging is to look at the code from where that point, from where the values of the variables are at that point in the program, and then see if everything's going how it's expected to perform. Because a lot of times there's errors in code that are uh, based on incorrect syntax. So you can't um, like if I got rid of this here, then that would be a syntax error, and I would actually get an error from VS Code telling me that Python can't understand this because I just deleted an important character to the programming languages, to the programming language. But there's also logical errors where there's it's not a problem with the syntax, but it's a problem with how you're typing the code. And it's doing something unexpected. So this is how we can try to fix an unexpected problem, basically. So this is how we can step through the program. It'll update these variables. These variables are what we're kind of paying attention to. See how this got updated from 0 to 1? These will just keep updating. Every time this item and this counter is getting updated. And that's basically making a, so if we continue, should take us to the end. Here, if we just run this without the breakpoint, um, it'll print us out this, but with the breakpoint we can see it's showing us each of these lines, these 137 lines. That's what was in the variables, and those variables were changing as the loop kept looping on, which is basically the idea of debugging in Python. So that's debugging. Now, next we have keyboard shortcuts. And I'm going to do these next two sections together. So we have keyboard shortcuts and code snippets. So code snippets are a way to easily type a block of code with only a couple letters. So what you have to do is, so we're going to go to File, Preferences, Configure User Snippets, and this is the snippets file that I have right now. It should come up. You should also have a test snippet file that looks like this. So click test.code-snippets, and these are going to be global snippets for you to use. And so I'm going to go over how we can add a snippet and then use it. And then using a keyboard shortcut, we can make a few changes to it that will help us make custom blocks of code. So this is what a snippet looks like. The prefix is the most important part. This is what you type in order to run the snippet and print the code that you want, which would be in the body. The body is the code that you want to print out to the editor, which is right here. Editor is this big panel here. And then we have the description, and then the scope is for what languages this is used for. So I'm going to paste another one in here. It's a little bit more complex. And these dollar signs just mean stuff that you have to put in yourself. And the cursor will go to $1 first, and then $2. You can just tab your way through the different dollar signs. That's what they're mostly used for, but you really don't need them if you're trying to make these snippets. But anyway, I'm going to make a TypeScript file because, or at least the scope on this one is JavaScript and TypeScript. But this one works for anything. But I'll make a TypeScript file and try running the snippet that I just posted in. And you can see just by typing FC, which is the prefix here, it already recognizes what it wants me, what I want it to do. So if I type FC and then click it or hit enter, this whole chunk of code is going to get printed out for me. And this is very useful for me because this type of code is used a lot. So if I need to write something quickly, or if I just want a more convenient way to write things, I can just type FC and then hit enter, and this will all get written out for me right away. Additionally, we have the log, which has that $1 pointing to this text of here. So it already has here highlighted, and I can just hit the delete key and then type whatever I want. And that basically just prints it out to the console. So that's code snippets. Really all you have to focus on is changing this file, paying attention to the prefix, the body, the scope, and then the description can be anything. And it'll write out whatever is in the body on this editor. Next, I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut to change the value of all of these this test variable. So I want to change it to something else so that it says something else and so that this thing is named something else. So I don't know. I'll just change it to technical communications. So now we have a function that's not test, but it's technical communications. And I changed, this is why keyboard shortcuts are very useful. I changed all of these at one time using Control D, which you can easily do. Now, there's also many other keyboard shortcuts here shown in File and Edit. We have undo, redo, cut, copy, paste. These are all important ones to know. So Control Z, Control Y, X, C, V, F, H. They're very common, but they're very important to know for programming. Control S is very important. It's a way to save your file. If you have to save your file before running it, or it won't run with the changes that you've made. That marks an end to this walkthrough. I hope you enjoyed it. If you need a refresher on the layout of Visual Studio Code, here it is. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the split editor button. So basically, it'll give us one group of editors, a second group of editors. We can move around files just the same way as we've been doing it. If you focus this editor, it'll open up tabs in this one. If you focus this one, it'll open up tabs in this other editor. and we can still delete all the tabs in group 1 and group 2, or all the tabs over them. And that marks an end to this walkthrough. Thank you for watching.